Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm joined by my co-host, Jen. Hey, Jen.
Hi, I am especially happy to be here today.
I know. I mean, we don't need to go into all the details, but you've had a week. It's at the end. Yes, not a good one, but you're still standing. You're surviving. We're pushing forward. And
I am.
I will say, it is perfect for the podcast that we're recording today, because we are back on our quarterly women's initiative and we're talking about challenges and roadblocks, and your week has been full of challenges and roadblocks and just difficult times, and the theme of today is kind of talking about how to tackle those, and our we're kind of circling about our advice on how to push through certain challenging times.
Yes, and this is a wonderful group of women to discuss this with and kind of discuss everything with, because these are amazing women in the industry and our peers and people who I just want to surround myself with every day.
Yes, like who are you gonna call? I would call any of these women if I'm having a tough time and I need to get through. So with that, let's bring them in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.
Good morning, ladies. Welcome back to Claims Never Sleep. I'm so happy to have you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
So, this is part 2 of our, I would say, our quarterly women's initiative. And we had such a great conversation last time. I didn't know, not that I didn't know how to follow up on it, but I was like, what do we talk about next? There's so many things. And I thought the next launching point for us to talk about was challenges, because we kind of introduced ourselves and kind of talked about, how we all got to where we are, but we all got to where we are not in a clear path without any roadblocks on our way. And everyone's roadblocks are unique. And I do feel as though anyone tuning in, whether you're a new claims professional, you're an experienced claims professional, or if you're not a claims professional at all, you can relate to it and also, turn to our experiences and learn from it and kind of be able to navigate your own roadblocks with finesse. And let's face it, this industry isn't the easiest. It's an amazing industry. There's so much career potential, but it's not a walk in the park, and it's not without its challenges. So, coming from where I stand as, a litigator and I work a lot in construction litigation and a commercial motor vehicle. It is, and being a female, there have been some trying times breaking in. And I remember early on having difficulty getting, the big cases. And not because I wasn't experienced enough, just because those big cases tended to go to people who would be more like the other people in the room. And I was not one of them. So I had to prove myself and kind of force myself in. So I'll just open up the floor to all of you. And whoever would like to share first, what are some challenges that or can you think of a challenge that you had in either early in your career that was a significant roadblock, and then what you did to kind of maneuver around it or climb over it?
Oh, where to begin? I got a few for you, but I also want to take it as I have had a lot of really great mentors that have helped me along the way. So let's go with you're emotional. So in claims, we're dealing with human lives. Mm-hmm. And so I am probably I will hands down say this, I am the most passionate human being in workers' compensation. Mm-hmm. So I will go ahead and say that. And I'll start with that. So I have always been a big believer in defending my team. So whether I've been a claims leader or a department head or running it as an organization, I'm going to have my team's back. That's super important to me. Mm-hmm. We can deal with issues behind the scenes, but we always show up as a united front. And so one of the presentations that was going on, we were presenting an injured workers case, and there was a disagreement between department heads. Again, we're doing a reserve roundtable type thing. And I was coming from the workers' compensation lens, and we also had other lines of business that were also presenting at this meeting. And so my adjuster finishes her presentations or her presentation of this case, and another business leader or line leader wanted to understand the position that we took in helping this injured worker on the road to recovery. So again, pretty passionate about this, and I'm very passionate about how we focus on the injured worker's recovery. And especially when my teams are doing what they can do in their power to get somebody back to work, back to life, there was a gray area on this claim. And my boss turned to me in front of my peers, which, just to give you guys like an idea of what this table looked like, I was the only female at it. And I got the, "Claire, stop being so emotional." And in that moment, I literally took my thumb and I pressed it into like if you make an L with your hand and you put it in, I don't know what this part of your body's called. And literally in my head, I'm like, "Do not react. Stick to the facts, stick to the facts, stick to the facts." And I kept telling myself this. I'm taking some deep breaths. I physiologically repositioned myself, because that is supposed to help break the emotional construct of hijacking. Uncross, recross, shift your body weight, do all of it, put your hands on the table. And I made sure that I was the last one to leave the room once the meeting concluded. So the next day I walked into my boss's office and I said, "I really, really like to talk about what happened yesterday." And he took the initiative first and flat out said, "I'm so sorry for the comment I made. My tone was off." And I said, "Let me just reiterate this. You have no problem telling me that I'm emotional, but let me be really clear. I bring passion. And if my gender makes me emotional, have at. But don't ever comment like that in front of my team or in front of my peers ever again." And it never happened again, at least to my face. And so as I give this story, the action items that I would give to anybody else that ever gets called emotional or anything like that, first of all, we've coined it as a negative term, and it's not. It means you're a human being and you don't get to choose your emotions. By the way, you get to choose your mood. So emotions happen as a result of experience and as a result of what's going on. And the neuroscience behind this is that your body has physiological reactions to situations that you believe in or that you encounter. So my action item for this was that if you've ever been in an experience like this or it happens, you've got to do something to physiologically shift yourself, because it's going to trigger a response to your brain. So shifting your weight, pressing into this, whatever that looks like, putting arms on a table. And then also look around the room and try and pick out like 3 things that are red. Get your body to get out of a hijacked position and your brain to get back into a cognitive function. And you've got to figure out whatever that's going to be for you to help diffuse the situation. And I want to give a giant shout out to my female mentor during this time, because she was the one that had actually told me about, "Hey, if this ever happens to you, here's how you handle it."
I think that's great advice, because I remember being in a somewhat similar experience early on in my legal career, that I was in my annual review, and I got some pretty tough constructive feedback. And I think I was like a year or 2 out, and I took that constructive feedback pretty hard. And it wasn't bad feedback. I mean, it was things I needed to work on, but I remember getting upset during my review, and my boss, who was my mentor, pulled me aside and she's like, "Don't ever let them see you cry." Which at the time I was a little like, what the fuck? Like, I'll cry if I want to cry. But she was right. She was 100% right. But I wish I also had the additional feedback that you were just giving, Claire, about some steps I could take because I couldn't help. The tears started welling up because I felt as though I was like, they don't think I'm good enough. Like I'm not doing as good as I should do. And I just was feeling bad about myself. And while it was very good advice, I wish I had that extra piece to it, that I could have had some coping mechanisms to work on it, so I didn't cry in front of all the older gray-haired male partners in the room giving me said constructive
Well, I think another
feedback.
thing, when we're dealing with situations like this, like we go into a cognitive overload phase too, where your decision making gets diminished, you're exhausted because you're trying to rationalize what you're feeling, which is a completely normal human experience. That I'm a big believer, though, you've got to have an arsenal of what do you do? How do you know yourself well enough to be able to self-regulate? And this is all about self-leadership and empathy for yourself and emotional intelligence of how do you take the power back in your control to navigate that situation. because a lot of times we like to do the blame game or it's not fair. And I'm not here to play the victim card. I'm here to make you guys better and like move us forward. So that's where it's having that self-regulation and emotional intelligence to figure out how you show up best to navigate these situations. But that one I feel like gets hit a lot, where it's like, it's almost like it's a dig. You know what? If I'm ever not emotional in my job, then I don't want to do it anymore. It means that my passion is gone. So I will continue to reframe that, where if I am not a passionate keynote speaker, if I'm not a passionate professor, if I'm not passionate in the workers' compensation industry, then I'm not going to be here. Because what is that doing? We only get such a finite amount of time in our lives that I'm not going to do anything that doesn't make me feel invigorated and like that my soul is on fire. So we should be so blessed to have people who can show up in that capacity, because the world needs more people that have come alive. So it's time that we started encouraging that instead of trying to give it as a slam. You want to call me emotional? Great. Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go cognitive to cognitive. Let's go.
Right.
On this. I'm here for it.
And I tend to go
Spar.
the opposite way that Meghan did. I tend to prepare for the fight.
Yeah, I'm with Kirsten on that.
Okay, you're going to challenge me on this? Okay. And I have to even pull myself back, because I do want the clear head, and I don't want the, abrasive, perception and being called the aggressive woman, when I am clearly just responding and doing my job with passion. I had one of my, so my first job, plaintiff's attorney for 7 years. And when I was making the switch, I had a number of interviews with plaintiff's firms and defense firms, wasn't sure which way I wanted to go. And I was interviewing with this well-known plaintiff's attorney that is all over billboards up here, and was a known rival of my boss at the time. And it was just, I wasn't happy with things, so I was going to do that. So I went in, and this man proceeded to pick up the phone and call my boss at the time. Now, how unprofessional is that? That you are calling somebody's current employer while they are in an interview with you. What if he hadn't known that I was there? Just so many big red flags there. But then, he gets off the phone with him and says to me, I don't think much of female attorneys, but
What?
I like it. And then proceeded to yell down the hallway to his son attorney. Do we have room to fit her? I think our females would really relate to her.
Oh man.
Run out of there fast enough. And I wasn't even going to waste my time and effort on him. He's like, oh, I'll follow up, great. What I did was then destroy his firm in the next 4 cases that I had when I switched to defense. So, that's how I chose to get my revenge. Revenge is a dish best served cold. But I mean, I've had it throughout my career. My first work comp case that I tried, I had a very older, experienced male defense attorney tell me, little girl.
Oh,
yeah, I've got that one too.
Longer than you have been alive. You don't have a case. And I won. I won my first hearing against him. So I choose to just show what I can do, and
yes,
not engage them too much. But I've been asked if I've been the court reporter. All kinds of great things.
I know. I remember early on, like my email signature, I didn't have Esquire after my name, just because I felt was like, I don't know. I was like, I don't want to be pretentious and put that after my name. Yeah, and then people kept responding to me as if I was the assistant. So someone was like, you got to put it at the end of your name to just quash it. So that I changed it from there. But it wouldn't happen otherwise, right?
It's kind of hard, right? Because I feel like, so I've gotten the don't ever cry, because the gentleman in the industry will not take you seriously. And I was very young. And that was a female VP that shared that. And at the time I just felt so struck by kind of the status issues that women and men have because of women show emotion. To Claire's point, we're emotional, we're angry, we're bitter, we're aggressive, but men are convicted. Men have a supported opinion. Men are just stating, essentially their position. And so I do think that there is some of that, but actually that most interesting feedback I feel like I ever got, which is similar to the emotional comment that Claire had and how she said it's like she's passionate. Literally quote from a person who was a general counsel at a company I previously worked for: Evelyn, you care too much.
Oh.
And I think that this could have been anything. This could have been that maybe I was, standing on policy on something. This could have been that perhaps I treated it at that point, the company's dollars, almost like I would treat my own money, right? Mm-hmm. I think this is the right thing to do. Yes. I think we should care. I think that we should, I think we should be invested in the people, because insurance is a business about people. So we should care about claimants. We should care about their families and the positions that they found themselves in. And I also do think that when you work for an organization in a risk role, which is essentially what claims is, you should care about mitigating risk and protecting whatever organization you're working for. And that is part of the job. And at first I was a little offended, I'm going to say. And then when I kind of took it back and I really chewed on it and I thought about it, I thought, you know what, if the strongest constructive criticism that you and your seat have for me is that I care too much, I think I'm okay with that. Because I'm not going to stop caring because you think this is somehow a deficit, right? Or something that I need to work on. And I'm going to say that I've probably put the same level of dedication and passion and 200% into everything I've done. And not everybody really does feel that way. From a senior leadership standpoint, I think some senior leaders really do appreciate kind of that due diligence and excitement for, the work that we're taking on every day. And I would really encourage others to care, to put effort and passion into everything that you do, because if you wake up one day and you feel like I just don't really care about the work that you're doing, then you're in the wrong job.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So I've got two thoughts on this that I want to interject. So the crying thing. So let's look at this from emotional intelligence thing. Sometimes we're going to be able to control this and other times that we're not. Self-regulation is huge. And I think that you've got to think about this twofold. Yes, we are taught about this. And also, what if it flips? What if you've got somebody crying in your office? And I think the common misconception is that it's used as a crutch or a feel bad for me, woe is me. And I think it becomes that construct, which then shapes how people's perceptions of it are. But also, if your boss is making you cry or there's something that is causing you to have an emotional response like that, what organizational culture are you allowing yourself to be in? Mm-hmm. So again, I want to say it's like a twofold thing, because as you start to look at the different generations and who's got thick skin, who doesn't, this is where we've got to actually, like, where do we go from an accountabilities, a responsibilities, and like an expectation standpoint? Because those are going to be the things that, like, to Evelyn, to your point, if you're going to get said, if someone's going to say to you, well, you care too much. Okay, let me be very clear. Here is what my job expectations are based upon my job description. Give me some factual, objective measurements or any objective feedback that substantiates that impacts how well I'm doing my job. Like, I think the more that we can continue to take the subjective, soft, squishy bullshit and actually say, okay, and again, what is that impact? How is that impacting the organization? Show me how that's negative. Because I like to question people with data, facts, and figures. Like, okay, if you want to say this to me, what can you back it up with that can be proven and shown that this is a direct impact? Because if you think about this, and if we're looking at this from like leadership and organizations, what do you think is going to actually hold up when Kirsten takes you to court? Like, get out. And I have no problem questioning people on this because I think that's really important. The other thing that I think is also very valid is Kirsten's point on the age thing. So I wrote an article on this recently about beauty in the industry too, and how a lot of times women either have to be beautiful or you can be brilliant. You can't be both. And I find that very fascinating. Tons of research on it, a lot of research history from like even back to like the early 1990s on this topic. And I think age also plays into that. So to Kristen's point, when, you know, it's the, are you the assistant, et cetera. And then to Megan's point of not having your title. So I'm going to say as a 40-year-old female, that's a doctor, you absolutely put your title in. First of all, you earned it. You earned it. You put that Esquire down there because if you don't, how are they supposed to after you? And that's a big one. Now, I choose as a professor to be called Claire. I don't go by Professor Muselman or Dr. Muselman or whatever. I choose to be called Claire. My way of relating. And also respect or status, to Evelyn's point, status is respect in how people perceive you and what kind of influence you garner from a respect standpoint. I get to choose how people want to relate to me. I've got the credentials. You can see it all there, but that doesn't insinuate that people will have greater respect for me just because I have a title or a position. So when we start to look at that from like a roadblock standpoint, I think it's important to focus on that of you've earned it, so you damn well better own it, because otherwise, what was the point? Like, I think there's a lot that goes into that. And so I want to circle this back to the age thing and then open it back up to you guys, where we look at this and like when one of my first career moves, I became the first female officer of an organization. And I thought it was a big win. I'm a young female, shows that you can get there through hard work, resilience, perseverance, and support. And while my feelings and my internal accomplishments felt fabulous, the outside world liked to remind me from like a social expectation standpoint of what it thought. So at a private event, I was engaged in conversation with some of our team members when a C-suite executive of another organization interrupted me mid-sentence from across the table and said, "I'm sorry, how old are you?" And I was taken back for a second and I was like, who is this person? And I said, "Pardon me." And he responded, "How old are you? I assumed you would be much older and you're the new VP, right? Like you're not old enough to be a doctor." And so I confidently replied, "Yeah, I'm 36 years old and I have earned my doctorate." So then the gentleman follows up with another peer of mine and said, "So are you her secretary then?" Like the only other female at the table. And I was like, this is unbelievable that this stuff still exists. And so what happens in that, right? First response is when a new organization, I chose to laugh it off, not knowing what role this person played because, you know, as we've talked about the positionality of this, all right, if you say something, sometimes you can be insinuated as the B word. And also you don't necessarily know the politics. His behavior was inappropriate. And now knowing what I know, I would have gladly reintroduced myself using, all right, from you guys, I'm using my Esquire, I'm using my doctor, whatever it is, and stood my ground by refocusing the conversation that I was already having with my secretary.
Yeah.
I mean, this also goes back to, you talked about you can be beautiful or you can be brilliant, but you can't be both. But I also think that there are other, and I think Kirsten and Claire, I shared with you kind of that outtake from the Barbie movie, right? Where I think it's America, is it America Ferrera maybe?
Yeah.
That played that role, and it was so brilliant. And honestly, I'm going to say I'm not necessarily obviously a huge Barbie fan, but she's definitely evolved right over the years. But I think that as a mom of daughters and a woman in the industry, I think it was so powerful for me because she talked about all of the different status issues in juxtaposition. And it was literally this really great, probably like 2-minute monologue. And I think it's not just the beauty and the brilliant scenario. We also have things like you can be competent, like highly competent as a woman in the industry, or you can be likable, but you can't be both. If you are too loud at the table about a position that you are probably we'll say the best prepared and the best position to make the arguments or to speak to what the strategy should be going forward, perhaps you are aggressive, to Kirsten's point. And I just think that I want us as an industry to do better and move away from some of that. But I also think that this conversation here is very important because I hope there are some people who are younger in their career who are navigating these things and don't know what to do with them. And perhaps we can share tactics that we've taken to flip the script.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is where like I should have reintroduced myself, and when he would have said, "How old are you?" I should have just reintroduced myself and been like, "I'm Dr. Claire Muselman. I'm sorry, what was your name? I missed that." And I should have stood my ground.
What do you do here?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I must have missed that. And stood my ground and reintroduced by my title, like to Megan's point. Like we've got to be able to stand firmly in that. And again, it's not just about me, but what about the other people at the table and those that come after us? Like, I think I've pretty much made my name, drawn my line pretty heavily lately. Oh, not even lately, but like, I'm going to say it, fuck around and find out. Like Kristen's like, here you go. You think I'm this like pretty little flower. Awesome. Can't wait to see you in court.
Mm-hmm.
But also that shouldn't diminish anything that I've done, my brilliance, my strategy, whatever I want to bring to the table. But I think it is unbelievably more important, exponentially more important these days, that we have to actually take that 10 seconds of radical bravery and do something in the moment, because we shouldn't still be having these fights time and time again. I hate when I hear the youngers come tell me these stories. Because, well, one, it validates like, hey, I wasn't lying. This is real. I told you. And also it's like, I'm so sorry that happened for you, because I really would have thought we would have done better.
I literally had a guy call me, an attorney, very older, very experienced, was referred to me by another mutual attorney friend who said, he's looking for a job. He's very experienced. I'm going to have him call you. Okay, great. Calls me. Talking to me, I'm finding out where he worked, what kind of stuff he practices in. And like 20 minutes into the conversation, he says to me, "So what's your role with the firm?"
Oh.
And
file clerk.
Yeah. And I said, "Well, I own it. I'm an equity member. I run the Indiana practice.
I own this."
Yes. And had you taken, and I'm thinking this is where I had to, had you taken the, couple minutes to look up the firm that you are calling for a job about, you would have seen I'm right there. I own the place, or, look into me a little bit, or the firm, it was just so off-putting. And great, I'll be in touch. And he emails, and was like, "Hey, that was a really great conversation." I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to have to, go a different route." And I was still holding it back because of our mutual friend. And then he responds, "What do you mean? I know you need help. I know you've got work." And I said, "Honestly, I have to tell you, if you didn't even take the couple minutes to look into my firm and myself and what we do, that's not an attorney that I'm going to hire. I need somebody who will take that time and be prepared." Yeah. And then I got I didn't get that vibe from you. You're really off-putting with me. Mm-hmm. It was just
because it's you, yeah. Right? Like, yeah. And
yeah.
Kristen's so off.
But it appears a situation like he's like, "Oh, well, I don't like. They'd be honored to have me. I don't need to do any of the work
accountability, none. Like just no shame in his game. I would have been utterly mortified to ask somebody that. Like, no.
I feel
like
how
old he was. Perhaps he didn't know how to use the internet.
Probably. That must have been it.
I feel like being a female in a male-dominated industry is difficult in itself. Mm-hmm. And then I'm also married to a surgeon. So there is nothing that erases my credentials faster than somebody finding out I'm married to a doctor. Mm-hmm. I constantly get I remember I had just graduated from law school. I was in court and I had my engagement ring on and talking to opposing counsel. And he said, "Oh, what does your fiance do?" I said, he's going to be a doctor and he's in medical school. And he looked at me and said, "You're too pretty. Just stay at home."
Oh,
and I mean, it just happens all the time. I mean, like, I think about buying a car. The last time we went to buy a car, and the car salesman kept speaking to my husband, and he kept saying, "Talk to my wife. This is her car." And then we got into the negotiations, and he said, "Talk to my wife. I have nothing to do with this." And finally, he's like, "I'm just leaving. I'm leaving. If you cannot, I have nothing to do with this. She's the one who has the checkbook with her right now and is making all the decisions. Like, why can't you understand that? Right. And it's just infuriating.
Jen, I think you highlight though how to be a good ally. Your husband's a great ally. He redirects, like, no, this, you need to talk to her. You need to talk to her. You need to talk to her. I think that that's really important. I think that this is where we, like, what do? Like, you look for that. Like, I get that we're all strong women, and I don't want to say that we're the easiest to be in relationships with, but I need you to just show up and have my back. And I think your husband does a nice job of illustrating that through that example.
Absolutely.
He also knows his strengths and Jen's strengths. And negotiating is Jen's strength.
Yeah, I would agree with that too.
Maybe he tries, Jen, like when you guys are at home, to challenge you, because I know my husband thinks sometimes it's a physical challenge to try to not only win an argument with his wife, but his attorney wife. But when we are out, he clearly says, nope, talk to the boss. So, it's fine. What's for fun sport behind doors, but out there, they've got to have our backs. Absolutely.
It is. And I feel like people assume I'm a stay-at-home mom because I'm married to a doctor. And I was at my own doctor's appointment recently, and the female physician said to me, so what do you do for work? And I said, you're the first person in a really long time who's asked me that.
I love that.
Wow.
I have a similar, Jen, scenario, because while my husband is he is very supportive of me, specifically women in general, having leadership roles, owning our story and our power. He is a senior member in the military. He is an active duty Coast Guard person, and we have a lot of events that we have to go to, and we literally have to go to like this black tie event like once a month. And we meet all these new people that come through, and a lot of them are also used to not just women maybe being married to people that would be more senior in their respective field than we would be, but also a lot of military spouses, whether by choice or by circumstance, cannot work or unemployed or underemployed. And so I always find it, I don't want to say I kind of presume the scenario I'm going to be in when we start getting to then what do you do conversations, but it is interesting because when you tell somebody that like you're the director of claims nationwide for particular programs in a large insurance carrier, I feel like in the military community, it's not that all of them disbelieve or are completely disrespectful, but it is such a surprise to them that, oh, you're not a stay-at-home mom. No, I mean, I do have 3 daughters, but they're, in elementary school and middle school and high school. I couldn't imagine.
I don't think you need to justify it, Evelyn. No. I have 3 daughters, period. Who cares about like the circumstances?
But
it's really unfortunate that the stigma continues. To your example, Jen, of the car salesman, I mean, whether it's car salesman, Home Depot, whatever, and I'm down in Florida, right? So there are still pockets of really deep South. Mm-hmm. Nothing wanting to do at all with women. And I'm not married, so I don't have somebody to advocate my corner. It is just me. And just some of the stigmas that continue, the individuals that I come across will be, oh, well, we need to talk to your husband. And they just don't want to give you the time or day, even though you clearly know more information than they do. Or they'll look to my 13-year-old son and would rather have a conversation with him because he's male than myself. And he's like, I don't know, you gotta talk to my mom.
Yeah.
So I've got an interesting question for you guys. Yeah. So I've got a question for you guys. So this was asked earlier this week. I had a guest speaker in one of my classes, and a lot of the female students were very, they all kind of gravitated towards this, the work-life balance or the work-life continuum. So I want to ask this because the question that was asked was, can you be a mom and have a career? So here's what, and all of us, I think, have shown you can have a personal life and you can have a career. What we never ask is, what about the relationships that help keep that family component alive? Like, it was very much like, yes, you can have a career. Yes, you can be a mom, but nothing outside of that. So think about, well, how do we become moms? All right. So what happens to the relationship side? And then it was a question of, can you have it all? So you want to talk about roadblocks? I mean, like, where do you find the give and take on this? Because,
define
you know,
all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. What does all look like? And also like the career and the mom thing. So Dawn, I'm with you. I'm not married. I have a really awesome co-parent that makes it so that my life is super easy to be able to navigate career and being a mom. But if I didn't have an amazing co-parent, and I feel like that part of the conversation gets left out a lot. We focus so heavily on role that you play, but what about all that support system that comes in from the behind the scenes? So I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are as we kind of talk about like roadblocks into things.
I unfortunately live by the mantra that I'll sleep one day, but that's not now.
You have plenty when you're dead. You
right?
Forever.
I don't have the co-parent per se. My son's father lives up in New York State, and I'm down in Florida. So, that's not really a dynamic. Now, as Evelyn kind of chimed in, my son is a little unique.
He's
and
brilliant.
that presents its own challenges because he is highly intelligent. So you look at this 13-year-old who is trying to grasp things in the world and learn. He's looking at his mom who's got a career, successful, works a ton, but then still tries to find ways to make him a priority and encourage his skills. He's been on a couple of interviews and going to be on his own podcast, and was requested to co-present at an professional HVAC symposium. So he's got his own challenges. But then, that again, I would say my ex-husband certainly loves his son, but has a different mindset, and was of the type at the time very supportive of me interacting, similar to how you ladies have experienced. But his perspective was, if you make X amount of dollars, then I can retire and I'll stay home. Yeah. So it was a very different perspective. Mm-hmm. But he would make comments as my son was growing up, and to this day, a great one was telling him to clean up. Right? Go back to those gender roles where all the women take care of the house and the kids and everything. I'm like, no, you need to do your part. Whether you want to say you're the man of the house or not, you need to contribute. There are chores. And, he would randomly say, well, when I was younger, daddy would say, don't worry about it. Mom's got it. Right? So how do you and I'm thinking, how does this 13-year-old whose father hasn't necessarily been in the day-to-day life physically for 6 years now, pick up all of these just different stigmas and perspectives, from culture. I mean, it's a very different environment that he's living in here, and he's now homeschooled 75% of the time, and he converses more with adults than children. So how do you,
we just have to show them. We have to and there is no right or wrong. Okay. I've gotten criticized from all different areas. I've felt hurdles and roadblocks from all different areas, but I also know I have to put my pride aside and ask for help. Mm-hmm. If I want
I'm sorry, what is that?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
I have to have help. Okay.
You don't do it all?
No.
But Dawn and I are just going to keep going till our graves. So help me understand what you're saying.
I am blessed with, I have different levels of babysitters on standby, and different levels of dog sitters for, okay, here's a quick couple hour one from some of the neighbor girls, or my dear neighbor friends. Oh God, I'm running late from court. Can you be there to meet Jack when he gets off the bus? I've got, ones that'll, Grandma JoJo, she'll be here, the night before. I have to be on a plane at 4 a.m. And my husband, who is a union glazer, has to be out of the house early. So Grandma JoJo will be here to get Jack off the bus in there. I also pile it on myself. I mean, Claire knows I took over as president of Valpo Pop Warner. It's like one of the hugest Pop Warner organizations in Indiana and Mid-America. And you guys want to talk about fun? I mean, let's talk about the men loving a woman in charge of this, a woman who knows football. And actually, I am more oriented.
Very organized now. It's very organized. They're getting a lot done.
And I know more about the football than the cheer side. The cheer is all foreign to me. So I had hurdles. You know, my husband came from the traditional family where his dad was the over the road truck driver. His mom just worked some minimal jobs, you know, but his father was the main support. So that was a hurdle he and I had when we first got together, and caused a lot of, you know, like, he's like, I've got to be the breadwinner. Well, it's not going to happen. Okay. It's just, that's not going to happen here. We're a team, and you make great money, but his benefits are gold. You know, he's got those great union benefits. I'm like, so let me kill myself with hours and stuff here, and you go ahead and make sure that you're here, you know, at night. I'll handle the morning. So I also love it though, from my mom's side, you know, she's always been about, you be your own person. Okay. You don't depend on any man, because she was a high school sweetheart with my father, married him right out of high school, and he ended up dying at the age of 38. Nothing was in order. It was not expected. And there she was without an education. I mean, she had a high school education, but to raise my brother and I as young kids. So she always hit that in my head. You marry for love. You don't depend on any man. You don't need him. And I am grateful that my husband is so amazing. I have friends that'll say, oh, I can't leave my child with my husband. And I'm like, why?
He's their parent too, right?
Right. Or like my mom will say, my mom, you know, and that's the traditional Greek family, you know, we cook, we do, you know, this, that. And she'll say, God, your husband's so great that he'll let you go on your girls' trips and he'll watch Jack. And I go, oh, you mean parent? Like, I'm sorry, what, Mom? But then on the reverse, I am cooking dinner for him. And I am like, the ladies in my neighborhood laugh because I still make lunches for my husband and my son, because that's kind of my language of love. And most of these women around here don't work. And they're like, oh, we don't even get up when our husbands leave. We don't make lunches. And they're like, why do you do that with what you do? And I'm like, because I love him. And that's my way. Like, no, I don't have to. Nothing says I have to.
It's a love language.
So I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. You know, I'm trying.
This is where you go back to, it's like, it depends. It's what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a question then for Jen. Jen, you guys both have huge careers.
Mm-hmm.
How do you navigate that?
It takes a village.
It does.
I think that's super fair.
Yeah.
And I think that we should normalize that conversation. We talk about some of these roadblocks. It's okay to outsource.
Yeah.
We outsource. I mean, number one, my house is a mess. And it's okay. You know, if you can't come and see my house being a mess, then we're just not going to be friends, or we'll meet for coffee somewhere else. You know, it's just, I can't. And that's the one thing I had a really hard time letting go. And I do have somebody who helps me once a week. It's clean the day she's here. But, you know, it is what it is. And I live in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I mean, it's not
the office.
Yes.
Sorry, Jen. Michael Scott, I tried too hard. I care too much. That's what I was saying from Evelyn earlier too.
And I mean, is this where we ultimately would have loved to end up? No, but our families are here. And on Monday nights, my mom makes me dinner and my parents have dinner with us. And, you know, on the weekends, on Sundays, we eat at his parents' house. And, you know, his mom makes dinner and his dad makes dessert. And we take some leftovers for lunch the next day. So, I mean, I have a whole community of people I can call on when I need somebody. And that's what makes it work.
So I agree with the idea of it takes a village. I will say, as a military spouse, having had to move every 2 to 4 years for my husband's job, we definitely do rely on each other, right? So part of how we make it work is we are in it together. We're full 50-50. It's not always 50-50. I go back to Brene Brown and she's like, give me your 10, right? She's kind of like, she meets with her husband and she's just like, I've got, you know, you have to be able together to get to 100. So the concept is, if I've only got 10, can you give 90? No, I can't give 90. And so then it's a discussion. It's a negotiation. You do what you have to do when you have to do it to make it work. So I travel a lot now. I think Dawn-Ann can speak to that. And I'm on the road a lot. So, but I've always traveled some, but it's definitely increased in the last few years. So Seth, I will give him props wherever you are, babe, you're at work. He will do drop-offs and pickups, and he will, be very supportive. And I don't get guilt trips about having to put that time into work, because he knows that when I'm home, I'm doing extra things that then he doesn't have to do. I'm doing potentially drop-offs. I'm potentially picking up because I've already worked 9-10 hours at 3:00 or something my time. And so I'm able to do that. We also happen to work for a very flexible organization that is very, in my opinion, I think CNF is one of the best carriers for like really putting people first and family first. And they will tell you, like, internally, family comes first. So I've been very blessed and lucky in that way, but because we do have to keep moving, we don't have the option of having like grandma on a regular basis come assist us. So it is a consistent evolution of constantly creating new community, building new networks. I used to be probably more of an introvert when I married him 20 years ago. I am not anymore. I am going to the school. I am shaking the hands, kissing the babies. What do I need to do? What do I need to do to, create connection? And it's not about what can you do for me. It is definitely reciprocal. I trade off with moms and we do different things, but it is, you do need other people. We could try to do it alone. But I don't know how healthy that would be. So I think it is better when you can rely on people for things. And also I'm with Claire. I'm just going to cop to it. I outsource a lot of shit.
Oh yeah.
I do. I have a housekeeper. Thank you. I send stuff to the dry cleaner. I will have groceries delivered. I will do all the things necessary because I like a clean house, Jen, but I don't particularly like to clean, nor do I have time. So, I mean, but I just do think it's like, advice is identify where you believe your resources are. And then if you can make it work and you can afford them, no shame. Utilize.
See, now, Evelyn, that's my challenge, and Evelyn's been trying to coach me, is that I grew up fiercely independent. I'm sure that was a contributing factor in everything, in my stubbornness. But I'm also so aware of everyone else. Like, we are all extremely busy, multiple priorities. And I sit back thinking, gosh, I know, I know to no end, I can pick up the phone, send a text message to my neighbor, and she will do whatever she can to help out with Atlee or myself or whatever, right? But then I'm thinking, her husband travels 90% of the time because he's in sales. She's got 3 kids in 3 different age groups. I do not want to burden somebody else, right? So it's tough, and it gets in your head as well.
Mm-hmm. Move to Northern California. I'll be your community.
Now, wait a minute. I left New York and the taxes and the politics there. I'm sorry, I'm not going to California.
Well, and I do think, though, all of our collective roles and our jobs do lend for a more flexible atmosphere to be able to juggle a little bit better. And I think there's like a misconception, especially with lawyers, like, oh, you're a lawyer, you're so busy, like how can you manage it? And I'm like, well, we are, but we can do our work other than being in court and depositions that happen to usually occur during regular business hours. Like, our schedules can be a little bit more flexible that do allow for certain things. Like, every day I pick up my daughter from school at 3:00. If I had like a traditional, in office job, I wouldn't be able to do that. And like for me, like, my husband does not have a flexible job. And from what I'm hearing, like, Jen's husband does not have a flexible job. Kirsten, your husband does not have a flexible job. Evelyn, your husband doesn't have a flexible job. Dawn-Ann and Claire, you guys have co-parents, but you don't have someone with a flexible job. So someone needs to have the flexible role to be able to kind of make the train keep chugging. At least that's how I've always viewed it. Since by the time my kids were babies, I was like, well, thank God I have this job that I can work from home when I need to. Not that when I was younger, I didn't really tell people I was working from home. Like, where's they don't know where the hell I am. I could be, I could be on a site inspection for all they know. But I was able to work it because you can kind of do the work from various places and you don't need to be tied to a specific spot to be able to effectively, serve your clients or handle claims. You can do it conceivably wherever you have a computer and a notepad, so to speak.
Well, I think COVID kind of helped us, because I know, with our firm, we had, the more traditional older partners where if you're not in office, you're not working.
It's like you don't exist.
No way you can be productive at home. And then COVID just, brought this all to this screeching halt, and we had no choice. And then we saw, people are actually more productive.
They are. And
they're also able to balance their life. Now, where it's a bummer is you don't have that downtime and like that buffer. I feel like there's no buffer there coming home from the office, but also I'll take that because I'm not wasting 2 hours commuting.
Exactly.
When I could be throwing laundry in or dinner in, or here when my child gets off the bus, or able to run over to his school party midday. So, I am thankful for this flexibility, and technology advancing, and, being able to sit out at a football practice with my laptop, because my days don't end at 4, but we got to be there while the sunlight's out. So
I think there's also, what you're showing a really beautiful thing by illustrating that, Kristen. It's the power of choice and your scope of control. You choose to be a part of your son's Pop Warner League. You choose to also show him mom still has a work and a career, and you choose to do that while you get to be outside and be physically present. I think the power of choice in this is also really important. And I think as we see employers start to continue to assess, are we in an office? Are we not? What's work look like? We see more and more entrepreneurs coming out. There's such a big power of choice. And this also goes into Evelyn's point on all right, I got 10. Okay, so I am choosing to give 10 right now. What else can I do? A lot of this is our choice. So you can either be proactive in realizing your choice, or you can be passively conformed into whatever it's going to be. And I think that starting to have those conversations about what does that look like? If it's important for you to be home with Meghan at 3, that's important. Like, that's it. So I am choosing to make this a priority. Now I might have to choose something else later on as a result, but that's now a definitive, I am choosing for my life with my family, my scope of control.
I really love that. And also when we think about control, so those are the things that we fully control. And then there's like the sphere of influence, right? Which is both a leadership thing and it's also just a real life thing. So then there's kind of the, what do we control? What do we influence, and what is completely outside of our control? And I think that is so relevant here, but I also think it's like a relevant talking point for anyone listening. If you're young and you're worried about the part that you can't control, maybe you get out a pad of paper and you write down, you do a brain dump. Mel Robbins, thank you. You do a brain dump and you write down everything you're thinking in the morning or, after the weekend, and things maybe that just, you need to do or you're stressed out about. And then you need to categorize those, I feel like, into, are 5 of the things on the 40 thing list things that you can do absolutely nothing about? Throw them in the garbage. Moving on. And then the things you can control, great. Those, hopefully you have a concept of what you want to do with them. Maybe they're quick hits, or at least you can bucket and clearly identify. And then I think where maybe we should spend the most time is potentially in that middle area, right? Things where maybe we have ideas about what should happen, but we're not we're not the only stakeholder in the game. And then putting our capital to influencing things that are going to create a better outcome, whether that's at work, a project, our home life, because you have to work with a partner if you have one, in a community, or pay somebody to do things for you. And so I'm curious to think what you ladies think about that middle area of you're not controlling, but hopefully you can influence. What are your thoughts?
I think what's also interesting is this week was a really bad week for me, right? And we had to put my dog down at the beginning of the week, which was just really rough for everybody. And my son had the flu, and my husband and I took a nice weekend in Miami and came home to all of this. And I got through the week so much better than I would have 10 years ago. Like, I just feel like 32-year-old me as opposed to 42-year-old me, it just has such a different outlook on things, if that makes any sort of sense. Like, I feel like I would have panicked. I would have like hidden under my bed and not gotten out for a week. It would have been crippling. Whereas this week, it's like, you're going to get through it. Right. And like, and I think, and I said this to Megan, like, I'm lucky I have such a great partner in Megan that if there's a week that I need to back off, she could pick up my slack too. Right. Yeah. And it's nice to have that relationship, and also nice to know, like, I'm not getting fired after a week of a really bad week. Like, I'm going to get through it. I'm going to work more next week and figure it out. And I think it's just knowing that, like, everyone has these weeks, right?
I think you bring up a good point, Jen. It's like giving ourselves permission on these unwritten rules. Like, they're unwritten rules. They exist everywhere. They're the standards that we hold ourselves to, whether they be social, outside factors, and then what's truly there. And I think that what you're saying from like that 10 years of more life experiences, it's going to be okay. I'm not going to get fired over this. We all have bad weeks, and really reflecting back on that human component again.
Exactly.
Right. And again, some of these
it's
things
how you rebound. And
yeah.
I always try to think of like my yaya, which is Greek for grandma, would always say, this too shall pass. Mm-hmm. And okay, we're going to get through it. We've gotten through worse. We'll handle it. And that's what I try to tell. You know, I've got an associate attorney right now. She's got her son just turned 1, and he's in sleep regression, and she's, you know, running on no sleep, running on fumes, dealing with crazy pro ses. And I'm like, okay. She's like, I don't know if I have any brain cells left. I'm like, you do, and they'll regenerate. But right now, just sleep when you can, work when you can, send me what you need, and we'll handle it. Exactly. You know, this is just a small time, and you're gonna look back on it and be like, you know, you might laugh someday, but right now you're not, because sleep is nice. So, you know, it will get better. It will. And then you'll have, you know, little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems.
But by giving her that support, you're part of her community. You're saying,
right,
if there's something that you can't get to, give it to me. And we're going to, as a team, we're going to address it. Just to Jen's point of, you know, if it's a tough week, she can rely on Megan to pick up the slack this week, because you would do it for Megan. You know, I will say not every work team at every time has that capacity, which is some of the stress. But I also think people who are more junior in their career, especially ladies, are thinking they have to be everything to everyone all the time, and are afraid to raise their hand and say, I need help. So I mean, I try to tell people at work, if you need help, call me. If you need to take the day off, take the day off. And, you know, I'm going to work your desk too, and it's going to be okay. But not everybody is like the 6 of us. So then what advice do we give to people who are listening that are young ladies or junior in the industry that are like, I have got a plate that is too full and no one has stepped up to offer? What do I do?
It's the element, though, that we've all been there, and it's not unique, right? Mm-hmm. So there's so much based on perception, right? Whether there's things you can control or not, right? So I think of it just kind of culminating some of the other comments, things I can't control. I can't control when my autoimmune is going to act up, right? Mm-hmm. I can't control what somebody else is going to think when I walk in with my suit coat on in corporate America and I got sneakers on and with a limp, right? I can't control that. But the challenge is then the perception on it. And I think so many, especially young women as well, and in this exact example, I'm overwhelmed and it's going to be viewed as a sign of weakness or that I'm incompetent. You need to realize everyone, male or female, has been in that boat. And it's the stronger person to speak up and raise their hand before it's too late and say, hey, need to regroup, need some help. Let's talk about this.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was also going to say as well. Like, for anyone listening out there, that especially the younger generation, if you find yourself being overwhelmed, you have to speak up, because no one's going to know what's going on unless you let them know. Like, you can't just assume people know what's happening. And if you do speak up and you are confronted with, say, negativity or someone who is not helping, then you might want to start thinking about a move or a pivot.
That's my best advice. Like, sometimes you can't control the stuff with your kids, with their schedules, you know, but you can control where you're working. So if you are in that situation where you're not getting what you need, the support you need, the collaboration, the environment, it's, you know, you can go anywhere. This day and age, you can go anywhere. There's jobs everywhere needing good people. But I'm also seeing, thankfully not in my associate, but I am seeing a lot of new attorneys, though. They don't have accountability.
Yes.
They don't take pride in their job. They don't want to, you know, if a partner asks them to do something, oh, I'm kind of busy right now. Like, I would have never said that. Like, give it. I will do everything you need me to do. So we are seeing a younger generation, though, that just, I don't know what it is. I don't know where the disconnect is, but it is. And I'm supposed to entrust my clients and my work to them. It's already hard enough to give up control.
We should have all of them read The Speed of Trust is really what it comes down to, because they're young and they did, to your point, they grew up in a different time, but also like really generations, societal norms have evolved a bit, although I don't think they're that different at work, and that maybe you can work from where you'd like, but you still have to work. And, you know, as kind of a leader of others, or, you know, just somebody who's also been a peer with other people on the team, if you show that you're all in, then I think if you work for a good leader, they're going to be all in for you. Right. And they're going to support you and be your backup and get you what you need when you need it, because you've shown that you're hardworking, you're ethical, you are doing the right things, and you're putting both, I would say, the effort, which could equate to time, or it could equate to just skill. You're putting the effort in, and you are also kind of like putting in your intellect, your thought process, your skill. And that's something that, like, listen, if you need a day out, you need a day out. We're going to get it done. We're going to be a community. But Kirsten, to your point, there are people now that think that there is some kind of ticket to the top that doesn't include hard work. And that's just, at least in our industry, that is still not the case. And so people are going to have to, I hate to say it, some people are going to learn the hard way.
Yeah. Well, just the other day, a good friend of mine from law school texted me, just exasperated with the younger generation, and she was telling me, she's like, you know, I had this wonderful associate. She's amazing, but she came to her not even mid-year, part year, looking for more money, and I was like, was it review time? She's like, no. She just felt as though she deserves to make more money. And I was like, you know, I appreciate her advocating for herself, but like, is there proof beyond the pudding? Like, is there stuff there? She's like, no, she's really good. She's like, but she's still like a year plus out. And she's like, but you know, I did the work. I got her the money. And then she said, I still need to think about it. And I was like, she'd be dead to me. I was like, after that, I'd be like, I don't know. Like, I was with her. I'm like, I'm glad you advocated. I think you should have chose maybe your timing a little bit better. But then, like, they went out of your way and they got you what you asked for. And you're like, well, I'm not sure anymore. Like, I was like, my God. She's like, I don't know what to do anymore.
She may be smart, but maybe she's not the best member of the team. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, sometimes people could be very technically good, and then, but that's flaky.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah.
It would lose a lot of credibility in my book, I think. I'd be fine with the up until the point of like advocating for yourself and saying, this is why I deserve more, even though it's mid-year or whatever. But then once you get it, you're like, oh, maybe.
This from a person who was once a legal recruiter a very long time ago. It's a time period that I think of, I don't know if I would say fondly. It's probably not fondly. But did teach me a lot about full cycle recruitment, HR, and things to think about. So I would say this is kind of like the other side of the coin of if you as a candidate aren't happy where you are and there's a lot of reasons why, and you've dug down into that and you decide to leave and you get a great opportunity with another organization who you believe is going to give you that community, that kind of support for you to continue to grow, and maybe it was some money, and you go back and you decide to give your notice. If somebody gives you a counteroffer, I'm going to say 99 times out of 100 no. You're not going to take the counteroffer if they didn't do the right thing at the time that maybe you had approached them 10 times in the last 2 years. The issues that you had with them are already going to be the same. So I would say this is the other side of that coin. This person who you thought was great, technically very good, hardworking, comes to you. It's kind of a weird ask. Maybe they haven't really earned it yet because they're very junior. But to Kirsten's point, people that are sometimes in that kind of younger, newer work market think that they're going to all start off making $200,000 a year and, a company car, which isn't always true. If they're going to ask you as the boss and you feel like I've got to do it because even though I think it's weird, like I can't afford to lose them. And then they come back and they say, yeah, even though you got me everything I asked for, I don't know. I'm not sure if it is me. It might be you. Then I don't know. I think I would have to say, I don't know if you're dead to me. That seems harsh.
So I got to ask this. I've been quiet. I've been listening. I got to ask, why not just call it out what it is? Like, I have no problem. Like, so I work with people all the time on negotiating salaries and whatnot, but I always make sure that they ask for proof points, not just because I feel like I need a raise, but here's the work product that I've done. Here's what I'm showing. Boom, 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 boom. So if somebody comes to you and says this, like, I like to look at most things from an expectations, accountabilities, and responsibilities standpoint. Like, here are the expectations of my job. Here's let's say if we've got a Kirsten, I've overshot it. I've done way better than you could have ever anticipated. So if you can't give me the money now, can we look at a 6-month review and I can show you how awesome my work product has been? Like, can we push that back onto people more with here's the expectations instead of us? I feel like we've all been like really nice and we don't give feedback in a constructive way. That's like, okay, you just started here. You are not going to be the CEO. It takes a lot of life experience. Even to Jen's point, like my 42-year-old self versus my 32-year-old self would have looked at something as a fire versus just some smoke. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if we need to be having better conversations that are more direct without sugarcoating this stuff.
There is no doubt that I think, at least for myself, that I think many of us suffer from sugarcoating and not having the direct conversations, because the direct conversations can feel uncomfortable, and we don't know. I don't like to feel uncomfortable, but I would agree that the direct conversations need to happen. Like, the sugarcoating isn't really helping anybody.
I also do, though. I do want the younger generation to advocate for themselves. So there, it's a balance on both sides. I remember, my first review into this position as defense, and I was told, in this review, like how great I did everything, my first year. It was a wonderful first year. I'm knocking it out of the park and blah, everything was exceptional. And then I heard, oh, but okay, so we're giving you the standard raise.
Yeah.
And I said, nothing about what you just said with my performance was standard. So that's not going to work for me. But I've always been that outspoken person, and I just want people to have the voice, know their worth, but then also know their place. It's like, it's such a hard balance.
It's just, here's where it comes back to. It comes back to power and status.
Mm-hmm.
So the status being very heavily related to the respect piece. And that's the difference in this. You have to earn the respect, whether it be through work product, showing up. How are you showing up? And then what do you do with that? And I think that is what gets garnered over time from a consistency standpoint, to have that point where, Meghan, I'm impressed that you guys went and found the money. Like, that's a huge deal. And also, here's the two-way respect street. I can do this for you, but how are you now going to show up for me? Here comes that duality and respect.
Right. Well, ladies, we are pretty much just out of time, and Kirsten has a hard stop. So before we close up, though, since we've been talking so much about roadblocks and advice and getting over those roadblocks, I just want to hear from each of you, 5 words or less, what advice you would give to someone in the younger generation when they hit a roadblock, how to get through it. Kirsten, I'll start with you because you're at the top of my screen.
I always say power through. I with everything in my life, and it's probably not right. Any therapist would probably tell me I'm just damaging myself, but power through. Like I always like, okay, you give yourself one day. And I know this isn't 5 words, but one day to sulk, one day to whatever, take it through that evening, wake up the next day, a whole new person, and with your plan in place and how to get through it.
One day is good advice.
That's
you can
what
sulk,
I think.
but you gotta can't carry it forward.
No,
I can be guilty of carrying that shit forward.
God, I really like that. That's beautiful. Maybe I'll take that now.
Claire's like, damn it.
Well, I've started to deduce it to you get 15 minutes to whatever, because again, we can choose our mood. So I take the Daniel Huberman approach to this, where it's find your music, give yourself 15 minutes, amp yourself up, wallow, whatever it is, and then move on. Because I think at the end of the day, and I know that this is the most unempathetic thing, and especially coming from me and what my brand stands for and who I am, nobody cares. Let's be very clear here. I'll say this. I had a kidney infection last week. It is still going on. But you know what? I still had to get on an airplane and go do my job because it's my job. So you figure it out and you move on. And then now I drink way too much caffeine, you guys. So I am working on it. And even Starbucks is it says, I know less espresso is hard, but you're doing great. So I'm working on it. And also my jobs still have to get done. I still have to show up for my students. And I think that there is, I'm with Kristen on this. I busted my ass. I wouldn't trade it for the world. Now, does my power and status reflect that? I don't know. What do you think? I mean, that's where I think self-reflection comes into a lot of this, but I also don't offer a lot of empathy to myself on this. And maybe that, I don't know, I like the day and then you move on, but also the work's still got to get done. So,
and I mean, I feel in our positions, we don't have a day. Okay, that's for extreme.
You get 15. I can give you 15 minutes, Kristen.
Yeah,
I'm
just gonna keep going. There's no. But yeah, I when I was going through IVF battles with trying to get my son, and we would find out it was a failed round or whatever, or I had a loss. I'm gonna sulk. That was my major where I did take a day. But then that next day I woke up researching and giving my doctor hell about how he was going to figure it out and throwing myself into work. But I know everybody doesn't function like me, or else they would own the place. And this is what I'm trying to tell people. So that's why I am trying to be a little more empathetic, Claire, and okay, you have your day, do whatever. I'm here. I'm willing to help, because I know everybody doesn't just internalize it like me.
How about you, Dawn-Ann?
So I guess mine's more of a little bit of a stepped approach in what I've done over the years. And what I would say is, one, don't overreact in the moment, because you don't want to make things worse, right?
I never do that, Dawn.
Oh, believe me, I can't say that I've always followed it to a T, but I'm saying on the back end, I'm like, shit. Reflect on the situation, and then my brain goes to Baymax and all that and saying, find another angle, right? And at the top of it all, always remembering to respect yourself and know your worth. Yes. So if it's, again, going back to that whole conversation of what are things you can control, what are things you can't control, right? And maybe it's just an environment that you shouldn't be in, and it's not something you can control. That's where it goes back to respecting yourself and knowing your worth.
I love it. How about you, Evelyn?
Wow, that's hard. You guys are hard to follow. So I guess I would say that I am a fan of the pause, whether that's in an active conversation. And I think a lot of kind of people who are more junior professionals think that if there is open air, you have to fill it. No, you don't actually. And actually, I think that they're afraid that if they're not talking, it kind of somehow translates to weakness. It doesn't actually. More words is not better. In fact, I would usually say that, when you're pitching to senior leaders or you're talking to somebody who's really experienced in the industry or, across the table from a pit bull, opposing counsel, that there is power in that. Just breathe. And, hands on the table in front of you. Claire's a big one, probably to talk about body language. I know. Hands on the table in front of you. We're not going to hide our hands down here. Breathe. Think. And you may have to, we're going to say emotionally erupt. You may have to kind of address it out loud, like whatever the elephant in the room is. But I like the pause, and I also like the consideration of like a mindset shift. Now, what we a lot of times are talking about here is we are wanting other people. We want to use our influence. We want to educate. We want to mentor other people up. We want to talk in the industry about getting what we would consider to be maybe some of the problem mindsets shifted. But each professional needs to be ready to shift their mindset based upon every single scenario that you find yourself in where you're going to have a roadblock or challenge. And sometimes that's something you can do in the moment after you take that breath. And sometimes it's something where you're going to have to put a pin in that part of it, and you're going to have to circle back on your own at 8:30 at night with a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon, potentially. But I think it is a really important point, because sometimes there are things you could have missed, and there could be, I think, to Dawn-Ann's thought, there are multiple ways to kind of attack issues and address problems, and that mindset shift is key.
Absolutely. And Jen.
I'll be fast.
Yeah.
I'll give them the same advice that I give my children every day. It's progress, not perfection.
Yes. Right?
You want to do it a little bit better than you did it yesterday, but we don't need to be perfect. It's not a realistic or attainable goal. So, just do your best. Keep one foot in front of the other.
Yes. Because who's perfect after all, anyway?
Not me.
Well, ladies, always a pleasure to have you on. We could have gone on, I think, actually, Kirsten, thank God you had a hard stop. Otherwise, we'd be talking for an hour. So thank you for that. And always a pleasure to sit down with all of you, and so much looking forward to, I guess, part 3 soon to come in quarter 2. Of course, to all our listeners out there, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to Claims Never Sleep. You can find us on your favorite streaming platform. You can also find us on YouTube. So thanks for tuning in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.